Game On, Empowering Women in Sports, presented by Amazon. Please welcome to the stage Rachel Nichols, Allyson Felix, Candace Parker, and Marie Donahue.
Thank you all for being here. We are so thrilled to be able to talk about some of the things that we love the best, right? And I want to introduce the panel here. Allyson Felix, we actually met today, which I said I feel like I know you because I have been an immense fangirl of Allyson Felix for so long. For those of you who don't know her, her official accolades: 7-time Olympic gold medalist, most decorated American track and field Olympian. She retired, and I have to look at my piece of paper here because there is no way I could get this right. 31 global medals at the Olympics and World Championships. She is a legend. But I will say what I've been so just dazzled and impressed by is she's a greater champion of women and mothers, and all of the ways that you have stood up and stood out for people who felt like, I can't say anything. I can't say anything because of all of this other stuff around me. And the fact that you put that kind of legacy on the line over and over and over again. I don't know, I'm gonna fangirl again. Just let's clap for Allyson one more time. She's amazing. Candace, my friend, who I've known for so long, we were just talking earlier about your first All-Star game. Also, legend, one of the most decorated women's basketball players of all time, #1 overall pick, 2 MVP awards, 7 WNBA All-Star appearances. You're looking at me like you expect me to say something else first. No. 2 Olympic gold medals, AP Female Athlete of the Year, and this is one of my favorite, 100 most influential people by Time Magazine. She's also like a kick-ass person. She's one of the most supportive people of women that I know, and goes out of her way over and over again to make people feel all of the warmth and amazingness and just incredible high bar that she has inside of her. So I'm very pleased to introduce Candace Parker. And then I would not be sitting here without Marie Donahue, who's sitting at the end here for us. She's the Vice President of U.S. Sports Content and Partnerships at Amazon. Did I get that right? Excellent. She oversees all of Prime Video's acquisition and strategy for sports media content and rights in the U.S. So if you liked Thursday Night Football, that's because of her. If you liked Black Friday football, that's because of her. She also has a million awards and accolades. I'm going to read a few. Most Powerful Women in Sports by Adweek. Most Influential People in Sports by Sports Business Journal. Power 100 Women in Entertainment by The Hollywood Reporter. Also, she used to work at ESPN, where she not only oversaw the development of 30 for 30, a bunch of other projects, Grantland. She was able to do the path to create my show, The Jump, which made a huge difference in my life. So I am eternally grateful that Marie Donahue exists in the world. And I'm just so thrilled that we're able to share this incredible group of women with you guys, because it wasn't always like this. And that's the thing I think about. When I was a girl, when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I knew how much I loved sports. I knew that it just sort of felt like it had this beginning, middle, and end story to me every time you went to a game, and there were heroes and there were villains, and you could just sort of lose yourself in this whole world. But there weren't many people who looked like me. So one of the things I wanted to ask you guys was, what made you think, oh, I can do this? And Candace, since I know you so well, I'll start with you, of just sort of, women's basketball was, hey, at the Olympics, and fledgling WNBA, but what made you think, I can do this, this is what I can be?
Well, first, it's amazing sitting up here with all of you all. I first feel like I grew up in Chicagoland watching the Bulls win championships, and it was MJ shooting his patent fadeaway, and the expectation was championships. And then it was like 1996 happened, and I can remember laying on the couch watching just women dominate in the 96 Olympics in Atlanta, and it was close to home, and it wasn't just in women's basketball who won the gold medal. You couldn't tell me that I was not Dominique Dawes. I built a beam. I cut out a slab of a beam in my backyard, and I was trying to flip. And my parents didn't have the heart to tell me that I was going to be probably 6'4", and that dream was, not going to become. But it was 96 that really changed the way that I looked at women's sports. And then 99 with Brandi Chastain, with the moment when she scored the winning PK. So there were just these moments when I was first beginning to start dribbling a basketball and playing soccer and hitting a volleyball that were so influential because I saw people that looked like me. And in '97, the WNBA started, and then it was over. Like, it was over after that. I wanted to be like Cynthia Cooper and play with that. And I think, I was always the little girl that, had to be told to calm down and not, not take off my shirt at the park, And then I saw other young girls that did that, and I saw young women that did that, and it really inspired me to continue to be myself while playing sports.
I'm sorry that things didn't work out for you and you
I
can't
know, I thought I could have been a pretty good gymnast.
Man. What about you, Allyson?
Yeah, I actually have a similar kind of story. It was '96 for me too, and we've never talked about this, but it was Dominique Dawes, and it was seeing her and just being fascinated by this young girl who looked like me. And at that point, I had no, Olympic aspirations, but I was just mesmerized. I tried to order a balance beam for our backyard, and yeah, it wasn't going to be my future either. But I think it was also just a family that pushed me and didn't think that my wild aspirations wouldn't be real. And I think there was something about that made it, that this wasn't something that I couldn't achieve when those did become real dreams for me.
Yeah, for me it was my mom. My mom came to this country when she was 17, never went to college, and just assumed I'd go to graduate school, assumed I'd do well, and I did sports my whole life. And so then when I finally got into the sports business, it can be hard. It can be hard for everybody. It can be hard for people who look differently. It can be hard for women. Whenever I'd struggle a little bit at work or get down, my mom would be like, "They owe you a raise. You should get promoted. You've been," so always. So even when I didn't have the belief in myself, my mom was always there. And also, what I would say, people always ask me, "Do I have mentors or things like that?" What I have are my tribe, and that's a bunch of women I've come up with through sports over the last 20 years or so, and I wouldn't be here without them, and they're the most incredible support network, and we lift each other up and are doing some fun things now, so if you stay at it, it can work.
You did not try to be a gymnast?
No. I probably hit millions of tennis balls at a wall across from my house, but no, I was smart enough to know my balance would not work on the beam.
What was the point, an early point you remember where that belief you had was tested? Maybe I can't do this.
Oh, I've always known I could do it. The question is whether I'll get the right opportunity or whether things will fall the way they're supposed to fall. So, and that's what I'd encourage all you guys to do. I mean, there's so many barriers. I always try to stay very positive, so I don't mean this to be negative, but there's so many barriers we're all going to have put in our way, especially if you want to work in sports as a woman or a person of color. And don't make them up yourself in your head and, add barriers. There are going to be enough out there, so you just have to believe in yourself and find your tribe. And, I can't wait. I'm so thrilled to be on the stage with these two, and not only because they're Hall of Fame athletes and they stand up, they speak up, they speak out, and all you've done, but what you're doing in your I'm not sure you're post-career yet, but all the things they're doing after, in addition to what they've done on the court and on the track, is just things. Women like this are really inspiring to me, and so of course we can do it.
Was there a time early on where one of you sort of reached that point of like, I don't know if this coach is going to give me a chance. There's too much around me. I mean, obviously later we can talk about the Olympics, but what was the point when you were more starting that sort of felt like, I don't know if this lane is open?
Yeah, I know for me, when I was a teenager and I was starting to do really well and I went to my first Olympics, but it didn't all come together. And I think it was the thought of like, do I really dedicate myself and continue on this path when there's no guarantee that it's gonna work out? And it is kind of like fighting through some of that like self-doubt, but also the outside criticism as well. and trying to stand firm. And I think what really helped was just comes back to team. Like, I don't think that you do anything by yourself. And there are so many people who invested and poured into my life. And I think that's how I really got over those humps and the hurdles in the way, was by depending and listening to the people who were really in my corner and mattered to me.
I think it's constant, honestly. Women's sports the last 3-4 years, everybody's like, women's sports. And it's like, we've been telling you this. This is nothing new. Like, right? Or women in sports. I turned on the TV to watch Rachel Nichols, right? And her delivery of sports. And I think that now people are seeing that when every day it's like that little fight. Or that little, like, you get up in the morning and you're like, I don't feel like fighting today. And I think that's constant, but what gets me through, I think, is the progress. And what gets me through, honestly, is my daughter, like, looking at her and being like, hey, she sees no limitations, honestly. And so I think I get inspiration from her on a daily basis just because this is the world that we're creating that she's gonna live in, and she doesn't see any limitations that she has. And I think that that's what kind of is able to propel us through on a daily basis.
It's funny, I mean, when I was growing up, I grew up around the Washington, D.C. area, and I would read the Washington Post kind of hungrily in the mornings and stuff, and in the sports department, which was fantastic, that's where Mike Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser came from, that's where a lot of elite sports writers and media personalities started at. There was a woman who covered the NFL team, and her name is Christine Brennan, and I didn't know it because I was 12, 13 years old. She was not only the first, but the only woman assigned regularly to be the main beat writer for an NFL team. And when she had been assigned that, it had been a big controversy and a big deal. And I didn't know that. All I knew was I would open the paper and read about my then favorite team, and there was a woman's name on there. So by the time I got to the point where people told me, well, you shouldn't want to go into sports, either lots of code, you're really smart, don't go into sports. You're a girl. It's not going to be easy for you. Why do you want to pick that kind of path, like that kind of thing? I would just sort of be like, it's too late. I already know. I've been reading this other woman. I've been seeing her shine for so long. I knew, and so I always had this almost naive attitude of like, oh no, this is going to be fine. And I remember one of my early jobs, one of my early beats, as still back in newspapers. I had the general, I was new to the beat, and I was pretty young, and look, I was young and I was a woman, and they had never had a woman cover the team, and I doubt they had anyone under 25 cover the team, and they weren't taking me seriously, and I had the general manager call me into his office, and I thought this was like a meet and greet of like, oh, okay, good, get to know you, and whatever, and he just looked at me and he's like, we don't want you here. And I was like, okay, and he was like, yeah, he's like, and the thing is, if we don't really talk to you, then you won't be able to have good stories, and then you will be replaced. So that is what we are going to do, because that is what we want. And it was for me, and that's what I was saying, was there something early for you guys? Like for me, it was just like, it was just a real sort of stopping point of this is how people can be, this is what's going to be ahead for you, and really had to kind of go around a lot of things to become successful. And one of the things that I think you guys probably experienced as well is that if you keep showing up, and for me, I think to convince people who didn't think I looked like I should be there, the fact that I was there first and I was there last at the end of the night, and I was there every single day, and I didn't take sick days and I didn't take vacations for a very long time, was one of the things to get over some of those early paths of, oh wow, you really shouldn't be there. Was that a factor for you guys? What were the other things sort of that you kind of showed, no, I belong here in a different way?
When I first got to TNT, it was interesting because it was me and NBA players, right? And so, you read social media sometimes and it's like, well, what? She's never played in the NBA. She doesn't know all this stuff. And so it was a real thing because I'm really big into like, you got to buy in as a teammate as well. And I want them to know that I'm not trying to be one of the guys, I'm trying to be one of the players. So just like D-Wade played the 2 position just like Shaq. He threw it down low, barbecue chicken, right? Like, just like that, they played that position. I see the game in a different way, and there's value in all of that. And so I think it was first, that was the conversation I wanted to have, that I wasn't trying to be one of the guys, right? I was trying to be one of the players. And so that was number one. And then number two, I think it was social media has a way of discrediting women because you haven't done it.
Yep.
And, you know, one of the people would tweet at TNT, and I think it was Shaq that actually tweeted back. He was like, you know, Candace doesn't know anything because she didn't play in the NBA. They're like, you listen to Stephen A. Smith religiously.
Right.
Has he ever played any type of basketball? No. So what are you talking about? So you have a way of like seeing and limiting people based off of that, and just sometimes I have time to reply and sometimes I don't. But I think it's just like, you're right, Rachel, it's just showing up every single day and being authentic to who you are and being prepared. And I think it's sad now because I feel like you had to do that to get your foot in the door, but that's what you want to do, right? Like, that's why we're professional athletes, is because we showed up every day, stayed late, got there early, and just kind of stuck to that schedule.
Was there a point, Allyson, where coaches around you weren't taking you as seriously as you deserved?
Yeah, you know what, I felt it most almost post retirement, and as I've moved into new spaces and in the business world, I think you show up as an athlete and you're put into that box. And so as I've started my own company and as I've gone to pitches and raised money and all of these things, it's so hard just being a woman of color, but then also when you show up and they think, you know, we already know your story. We know what you're talking about. And so it's been really challenging, and it is continuing to show up. It is showing that you do belong, even when you're in these very uncomfortable spaces where you're made to feel like you do not belong. And I feel like it's been glaring at times, but you know, you keep doing it day after day, and eventually I feel like it will make it easier for that next generation and the people who are coming behind it. But I don't think it doesn't take away how hard it is to be kind of on the front lines of that.
And Marie, I know you guys can't see what Marie does out in public the way we can with these two women, but take my word for it, she is one of the top 1% of the 1% of sports executives. The ideas you have, the way you manage people, and yet I haven't always seen the rooms of men you're in recognize that the way they should. What sort of, how did you get around some of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really important are finding allies. And I came up through sports actually on the digital side. We started ESPN.com and a lot of digital media, so I was with a bunch of geeky engineers who were actually, when we then started going up to ESPN in Bristol, I'm not sure they really saw I was a woman up there. They just saw I was one of the nerdy internet people. But those guys actually were the best allies I ever had, because they would look at how I was treated in meetings and how I would say something and maybe the hearing aids were turned down or something, no one reacted, and then a guy would say it and do the, yeah, and so I really do, I'm a nerd myself, but I always have a lot of nerd allies, and so finding allies and finding people to actually amplify. I mean, even the women in the Obama administration, their articles about it, they did it too, because some of this is just unconscious, and so it's really important to find allies, and I've always found strength and comfort in that. And the other thing I'd say is own it. Like, I'm in a position now where I own making sure we have women, making sure we have diversity. I threw my body in front, well, is this on the record? I've thrown my body in front of hirings to make sure we're being intentional in front of the camera, behind the camera, in the offices where decisions are made. We have to be really, really intentional about it. And I'm a huge, obviously I've appreciated and known the value of women's sports forever. I honestly think what's helping now is there are women in buying positions. You see those sponsorships for the W and the NWSL, a deal we just did a few weeks ago for Amazon. But there are women in those buying positions, and they're owning it. They want the association with female athletes and with women's sports. So I just think, it'll always be a little harder, at least for the foreseeable future. But let's just own it, and support each other.
Candace, you mentioned tweets, things like that. I think one of the hardest parts of this job right now is we're in this in-between phase where everybody has an opinion, everyone feels they get to tell you their opinion, and it's true of all athletes, right? Any professional athlete, man or woman, faces this, but with women, it becomes so personal. What you look like, your body, how you're using it. What are some of the experiences that you've had with that, and how do you navigate that? Allyson, I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, it's such a different time where it feels like everyone has access to you. And, you know, you're exposed to some pretty nasty things. And for me, I guess I have to remember, like, who is on the other end of it and who I want to listen to. And I think that's been the biggest help. Like, you always have the urge, like, okay, let me see what's happening out there, what people are saying. But it's like, do you really care what those people are saying? You know, what about the people that I respect, the people who are actually in my life and who matter to me? What do they think, and how are they pouring into me? And so sometimes it's just blocking out the noise. You know, I feel like before I go to like a major competition or something, I'll take it off my phone. Like, if it's not gonna build me up or serve me, and I have the tendency to look at it, then I'm not gonna feed into that. So I think it's just kind of knowing how you operate, and I think sometimes it doesn't affect certain people, cool, but it's like just knowing yourself and how you want to handle that.
I agree. I'm big on, like, I want to show you. That's the way that I kind of operate in terms of, sometimes I read the negativity because, yes, on the basketball court, it's that way, but now as I'm transitioning into television, it's like I want to be the most prepared. I want to watch the most amount of basketball. I want to have the most amount of stats. And I want to have that knowledge to be able to defend. I mean, the dinner table discussions that my brother, before Google, where you had to come with straight facts, that prepared me for the discussions then now that I have at the desk with Shaq and, you know, with Jamal and things like that. But I think it can impact you when you worry about other people's opinion, but I also think sometimes people can't see what's to come. You know, like, I look at how 3 or 4 years ago, you know, people were like, well, Becky Hammon being a female head coach of a women's team, what's that gonna look like in the locker room? Well, there are a million men's coaches that coach women's basketball teams. But it's like they never think of it that way. So I just think sometimes people have small experiences and small thoughts and bias that they have to overcome themselves, and it's not, you know, our fight, if that makes sense, and you have to be okay with that. You just have to show that it is possible.
Marie, one of your front-facing talent, most high profile, just sort of faced a whole barrage of internet criticism. As an executive, how do you manage public opinion versus what you know about this person and what's important to you as her boss?
Yeah, I mean, I always try to lead and treat people with empathy. So obviously I lead with that, with our talent as well. And then as a company, we're a big company, and we decide how to respond or not publicly. But obviously I always lean into empathy. I think we're all human. We all say things we might regret. And so that's how I lead.
I think that's too, when you say about women in buying positions with women's sports, women in executive positions who understand a little bit more about how a tidal wave of internet criticism can stop even having to do with what the thing is about, right? It's just an opportunity, man. And there are a lot of people who have been sitting around and waiting for that opportunity with female public figures and female public figures in sports. And I was very impressed with Amazon and sort of how they handled all of that. And I think that one of the things that taught me kind of early was I used to cover a lot of football. I would be out on football fields, and a lot of the women who were also out there in a way that is totally reasonable would wear like sleeveless kind of shirts, dresses, things like that, because it can get very hot and all of that stuff. I came from newspapers. I still feel kind of weird being on television. I kind of feel like I shouldn't be on TV. I'm a nerd, newspaper nerd. And I always sort of wear a jacket or some sort of, whatever, or at least did back then. And Dan Patrick was doing his radio show, and he had ESPN on the up, and I was doing some report on the football field. And he was live on the air, and he said, Rachel's there. She does a really good job. You know why Rachel never wears like sleeveless shirts? He said, because she's got 2 full sleeves of tattoos. That's why. He is also, by the way, if you ever wondered, I don't know, this is deep sports knowledge, but if you ever wondered where the rumor about John Clayton having a ponytail down his back came from, that was the same thing, Dan Patrick. Oh, John Clayton's on TV. You know, John's secretly a hard metal rocker. He's got a ponytail down his back. So he'd do this kind of stuff. I would say that that was probably 15 years ago. To this day, I get people being like, oh man, you've got 2 full sleeves of tattoos. And since that time, I have been on television plenty without a jacket on. I became more comfortable with myself and have worn short sleeves on television. And there is literally hundreds of photographic evidence on the internet that I do not have 2 full sleeves of tattoos. But there are people out there who will tell you to their dying day that I have 2 full sleeves of tattoos. And that is what I have tried to sort of go back to and remember with some of that ownership people feel over women in sports in particular, to comment, to sort of feel like they have the right to say whatever they want, that even when there is evidence to the contrary, people will believe and say and do what they want to. And then when you're trying to prove a negative, trying to prove something that doesn't even exist, that you can't point to a photograph of, it's incredibly hard. And Allyson, I felt like you have dealt with that to such a degree, people not liking what you said, not liking some of the stands you've taken, and people using that as an opportunity to click over and criticize all kinds of other things about you. Do you feel like that connection was there?
Yeah, I definitely feel like that is like one of the very hard things when you do kind of take a stand that may not be popular with everyone, or an opinion that is bold, you know. And so for me, it was very uncomfortable feeling, you know. For the majority of my career, I had been an athlete and just head down, like I stayed in my lane. I just felt like that's what it was all about for me. And so I think it is, for me, it was really a kind of a journey to get to a place where I felt, I don't even say comfortable, because I don't think I ever did, but where I was ready to speak out on things. And I think that comes with it, you know, knowing that everyone's not going to like it. You know, there's going to be some opposing things, but I think if you believe what you're doing, you have to stand firm in that and stay.
When did you feel like?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I know you didn't say those things to be popular, but I will tell you, most men and women I know support what you said and appreciate what you said, and thank you.
Yes. Was there a point, Candace, where you realized along the way that you felt comfortable saying the things out loud?
100%. And I don't know if I've ever been the one that has stayed in my lane, but I think that I have been one to shy away from different conversations. And with that, again, I go back to my daughter. I cannot tell my daughter to be who she is, love who she wants, and live the life that she wants to if I'm not doing it myself. And so I think that was kind of the step of maybe, you know, the world puts women in boxes all the time, and sometimes I say this all the time, we do it to ourselves. And I think it's being okay with the way that you want to live and the way that you want to be happy. And believe it or not, athletes are humans as well. It's a big shocker, but athletes are humans as well. And I think it's being okay with that.
Was there a point for you where you felt like?
No, I mean, I have the benefit, I'm not nearly as public as these women are, so I think I have it easier, a bit easier behind the scenes.
I mean, still there's that point where you feel like you can talk in the meeting, you can sort of be the one to put your foot down, stand in front of the moving train.
Yeah, I've gotten
kind of thing.
comfortable with that. They don't always listen, you know, I don't always win. But I will tell you, having more women in the room is really helpful when you're not the only one. So that's another reason I believe in really being very intentional about any position or any opportunities we have, trying to help others get the same, because it only gets better when there are more of us.
And there are so many things about being a woman in a male-dominated field that I think give you an advantage. Your perspective is so different. How have you found that?
Well, you're remembered. I mean, good and bad, they always remember who you are. No, there's been all sorts of studies that, you know, especially in companies and I think in probably all decision-making environments, a diverse team leads to better decisions. I think it's really important in content. It's incredibly important in content. You can have a bunch of people who all look and think the same in a room, and they'll put out something that can destroy the company's reputation if you're not careful. So yeah, I'm a big believer in just making sure we reflect the population and our audience in front of the camera, behind the camera, whenever you make a decision. Yeah. So I'm always fine speaking up, but they don't always agree.
Candace, coming at it from the different perspective than nearly everyone on the desk with you, how do you find that being a woman is a strength in the way you're looking at the game, the way you're looking at some of these issue discussions that we have in basketball?
Well, it's so interesting because I think things come up. As women basketball players, you play overseas. That's the way that you feed your family. The WNBA is a summer job. So I went overseas for 10 years of my career. And so now with the play-in tournament, this is all new to the guys. You know, this is all crazy. They're like, wow, there's a tournament in the middle of the season. I'm like, we did this for 20 years in Europe. Right. So it's explaining to them that concept. So there's unique things that, you know, come to life on set that I've had experiences with and they haven't. But also it's just through conversation. Like I said, I think it's everybody brings in a unique point of view and everybody's able to see the game different. And I guess the biggest thing for me is not saying I'm sorry at the desk was something I think I made the mistake of my first couple of years.
Yep.
And I've made an effort to not say I'm sorry because Shaq sure doesn't. So, you know, I think it's when you do, you know, interrupt or whatever, it's more likely that the woman backs off. And I'm like, nah, like, we're about to do this. So I think it's just so, it's kind of checking yourself and making sure that you're being a good teammate, but you're also, you know, being confident in what you bring to it.
It's so great to watch, because I obviously watch Candace a lot, and you own your space. Like, that's the other thing. Like, and all of us have had to battle this, but, you know, when women get up and they speak, they tend to be smaller, they tend to go quicker. Guys come up, and they just own it, you know? So it's really great to watch you and just own it.
100%. And women are told over and over again they have to justify what they're saying in a way that men don't. My favorite thing to tell college students when I'm talking to them is, you know, please, as you're trying to work your way up, say yes. Say yes as much as you can. Yes to experiences, yes to work, yes to all of that. But when you have to say no, just say no. No, period, is a complete sentence. And that women are constantly told, no, because I have to show you my reason so you can judge whether it's good enough. And most of the time, the men around you will take that opportunity to say, oh, you can do that other thing later. Do my thing. That sort of thing. And no, period. No is a complete sentence. There's so many times in even sports commentary that you see women trying to justify their opinion. You don't have to. You're an expert. And I think that's kind of something you've really flourished at, and it's fun to watch.
And you are the person that first told me that.
Yes.
I remember talking with you during when everybody was doing lives during COVID.
Yes.
Rachel was on live, and you said that, and I think it's had an impact on, you know, my life, because I know we sit up here and we're balancing a number of different things.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you know, there are things that intersect and you have to say no. And it is a complete sentence and you don't have to apologize because you want to be somewhere else or you have to be somewhere else.
Yep, absolutely. You know, it's funny, we talk about the advantages of being a woman. One of the ways I've seen, Allyson, you just blow the doors off, is understanding in your post-athletic career in the business market what women need and want, and that there's men who just don't think about all these things that you and Saysh, your company, are thinking of. What sort of insights did you have where you kind of would say to guys like, come on guys, like, this is real?
Yeah, I think it goes back to like who's at the table. And now, you know, at my company, having a thoughtful group, a really diverse group, and we're able to have these thoughts. We have a maternity returns policy, which, you know, says that if your foot changes size during pregnancy, we'll give you your new size of shoe, no questions asked. And I think that that's something that men don't even know that your feet change sizes during pregnancy. So we get to do things in a very different way that is thinking about things differently. And I think it's also saying that just because things have been done one way for a really long time, it doesn't mean that we have to stay in that mode. And so it's really trying to push the box. I mean, we make shoes specifically for women, for women's feet. And the the fact that that hasn't been thought of, in this
Right.
day and age, that we shouldn't just be wearing men's shoes. I mean, it's not like this groundbreaking thought, but
And yet,
here we are. So I think it is really who you are working with, and being able to have more women in the room has really just been incredible.
yeah, and look, you gained so much attention for standing up with Nike, for standing up and saying, being pregnant doesn't discount me or make me weaker when I'm pregnant or when I'm returning from being pregnant. Were you shocked almost at the way these people who had been telling you how wonderful you were for so long suddenly treated you like you had a disease growing in you?
I mean, absolutely. I think I was shocked that it was such a fight. I mean, I was asking for something that didn't, to me, seem like a huge ask. You have a baby, you have time to recover from having that child. And in track and field, for whatever reason, you were penalized for that. And I was blown away that it was such a hard fight at that point in time. But it was, and I think also another reason why it was is the people that we were dealing with. I was telling this to a team of men. And it's really hard to have to do that and to explain these things and just for them not to get it. And so it was really difficult, but I feel really grateful to be on the other side of that now and for things to be different.
I mean, that's why you advocating is so important. I remember, kind of when I was pregnant being like, guys, someone has to have the kids. It's not my fault, okay? So stop penalizing me for this. And then it goes on past being pregnant. I mean, we were talking, Candace, right before this started. You were pregnant at 22, 23 years old. And I'm sure people thought, oh, that's a shame. She's not going to play basketball anymore, right?
Yes, that was, I remember being scared to tell. I'd just come off of my rookie season in the WNBA, and I remember being afraid to tell people that I was pregnant. And in fact, I did an ESPN cover shoot, like they didn't know I was pregnant, but I was pregnant. But I looked a little thicker. And so then I had to reshoot, because it came out in January. We had to do another shoot, and it's a ESPN, and it's like, how big can Candace get is the title of the story. And I remember just being like, I don't know how this is gonna go.
Yeah.
And being more afraid of telling people and telling my partners than actually raising my child and what you should be focused on. But, I had amazing people around me, and I think now having other mothers that have been athletes, that have gone through similar experiences, we're making it better for our daughters. And I think I've been a great friend with Allyson since we were, 16, 17, wearing early 2000s wardrobe. But yeah, Google it, it's bad. But it's been inspirational for me because my daughter gets to look up to her and look up to what she's doing and standing up for. And standing up for motherhood and having the right to have a career and a family. I think that's just what everybody wants. And so I think it's super important to have people like Allyson that are speaking up.
I mean, the way society looks at mothers is still not caught up to fathers in terms of how competent one can be when one is also wearing that other title. And another side of that is women aging, and especially I know there's a lot of women here who work around and in front of the camera. Maria, I've always been really impressed that you have fought for women who aren't just, young and cute. I do think that it is something that is still, especially in sports, being navigated of, women aren't really allowed to age in sports. And you see the number of really killer baller women who are sort of shoved and pushed off to the side while you see their male counterparts in the broadcast booth until they're literally 80, in their high 80s, thinking of one in particular. But what is that navigating both as a woman and an executive as you see kind of this frontier that I think, frankly, still hasn't really been addressed in the way it should be?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it again, it comes down to who's making those decisions. And so I also think it gets trickier because people probably won't say, if they're thinking that, they probably won't blame the age, but I think that's important for all of us. Just, I would never judge someone based on their age. I mean, you're producing content. You want the best content in the world. You want the best chemistry. So, yeah, that's not how I pick an on-air team. I pick the best teammates, the people who want to be great teammates, who want to work really hard, and who are really excited about the sport and want to bring, if they're ex-athletes, bring their unique take or other editorial content to fans and how to improve the experience. So age doesn't enter into any staffing decisions my team is making, and if I feel it is, then that's where I'm really intentional and I shut it down.
I mean, I think aging comes, obviously, all athletes, as they're getting toward the end of the career, everyone's like, I guess unless you're LeBron James, it's like, oh, you're getting old and slow. I think with female athletes, though, to me, from the outside, it feels like it is magnified. It feels as if there is a quicker trigger. Candace, I always felt like with the Olympic decision that was part of what was involved. I don't know if you did, but did you experience or have you experienced some of that?
Well, I think it's definitely anytime you're getting older in a sport, and we're seeing it obviously with LeBron, that's where the IQ and, you know, obviously it's crazy 360 layups and things like that. His athleticism is still better, but I think your mind takes over on the court. Now, off the court, you know, it is a little bit harder as talent because when people are tweeting at TNT, they're not tweeting what Shaq's wearing.
Yeah.
You know, they're not tweeting about Shaq's appearance. And so I think that there is a shift where it is kind of scary because you really want to talk about sports and content and be knowledgeable and bring, you know, your knowledge to the table. But it is a little scary when you start thinking about young and up and coming and, you know, you're on television. Mm-hmm. And so I think from a talent perspective, I think you just try to double up and just try to be even more prepared. But I mean, listen, I lean on the decision makers to continue because, listen, I love listening to Robin Roberts say good morning to millions of people, and she's older.
Yes.
You know, Hannah Storm. I mean, you go down the line, and so I think it is about content and those decision makers making sure that they're putting that best foot forward.
Yeah, I really felt it. I feel like I felt it since 2012. It is, I feel like, amplified for women in sports and a whole different way than it was for men. I remember in 2012 was my most successful Olympics, and after that it was kind of like, okay, well, now what are you going to do?
Right.
Or, of course, you're going to retire, right? Like, you've done the thing. But it's like I'm an athlete, like I'm a competitor. Why would I stop? Like, we don't tell LeBron to stop after a certain number of titles. Like, this is what I do. But I did feel like constantly then it was always about age, number, or what are you thinking about next? You know, if you're going to think about a family, then that's the direction you're going to go in and you're not going to come back. And so constantly, you know, felt that it was always being brought up. And I think, again, it is what we've seen. You know, if you don't see women who continue in sport for a long time, it's not what we're used to, but it doesn't mean that we're not capable. I think we're starting to see it more and more, but you do feel that kind of outside pressure and noise that, well, your time is up now. It's on to the new and up and coming person.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys are trying to change that from above as well. All three of you invest in women's sports in different ways. Candace, I can't even keep track. Angel City, volleyball, all the different, you know, women that you are trying to empower. Why is that so important to you?
Well, I can't go around and talk about how amazing women's sports are and not invest in it myself. There's a passion that I think is there. And let's just be honest, I think that it is the future. My daughter is a volleyball player, and I'm watching the amount of youth that are, I mean, it's the fastest growing sport for women at the youth level. And so I think that that's the future. I love volleyball, I love watching it. And honestly, I think it's about the foundation of the leagues that we're building. It's building it with the newness and the belief in women's sports and not building it because we have to, which I think has been the mentality in the past. And so I just am a firm believer in, you know, the future of it, and obviously giving my daughter an opportunity to aspire to play at the highest level, because I'm watching some of her teammates, and you need people that look like you, a league for you to be able to continue to, inspire the next generation.
And kudos to you, because we talked about women sponsoring, but women investing in women owners. I mean, that's the next step. Some of the NWSL owners are really changing that league. WNBA, that's actually probably the hardest mountain to climb in sports for women is ownership. So it's great that you and others are going after that.
You've obviously, that's one of your main focuses. Why is that so important for you?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with what Candace said. I think thinking about my daughter and the world that she's going to grow up in, and I want her to have all of those opportunities, and I think they're all important. And I think that women deserve so much more, and that's the only way that it's going to happen is if we change things. And so, I'm completely invested and want to make things better. Everything from trying to bring childcare to events, to grants for female athletes so they don't have to decide between motherhood and the professions that they love. And so just continuing to think about things differently and how can we be just fully supportive.
I think, too, there's been such a great evolution, and obviously there's so much more to go, but the value of women's sports, and the youth being able to, that sounded very weird, the youth, young people being able to, get the dirt under your fingernails, like know what it's like to want something so badly and get it or not, and to have teammates to rely on or not. And there's so many ways we as a society, especially American society, have valued sports and what it teaches, the hard lessons and Hoosiers and all of the stuff. Girls should get those too. Girls should get all of that too. And I think that there has been a little bit more of an acceleration in the last, 5, 10 years, would you guys say, of that coming around on both sides of the, hey, this is really important and part of an equal society, but also, hey, this is really fun to watch. And it's funny, one of my early jobs was covering tennis. And, in men's tennis now, it's a lot of very hard serves and quick points. And the women's game is where you really get to see tennis, right? You get to see the full flex of what tennis can be, because some women are extremely powerful, but you still don't have that level of physical power. So you have to be canny, and you have to have longer points, and you have to rally and have more of a net game and all of the other stuff. And frankly, it's a better sport, in my opinion. The women's version of that sport is the better version of that sport. Basketball has a lot of aspects where I think the women's version of the sport, because of the way women play the game, is different. It's a better version of parts of the sport. So I'm hoping that people see that with soccer, with volleyball, with all of the other sports that we do. There's someone standing in front of the oh, there we go. See, it is at 0. I knew it was at 0. I have like 16 more things on my list, but I just want to say thank you to all three of you. You guys are so lucky. These are 3 of the most exceptional women I know or have been around, and I'm just so thrilled to get to hear your perspective today. So thank you very much. Thank you.